So what we'd like to do is just give you a sense of what this panel is, what we're trying to accomplish, and then I'd like for Mike Prysner here just to briefly mention something about each of the panelists, and then I'll move into posing a specific question or comment or idea to each panelist that they said they wanted to discuss, and then you guys can follow up with your questions. The reason we're doing this Global War on Terror panel is because we understand, I'd say very specifically and urgently, we understand that the future of Veterans for Peace in many ways lies in the proper nurturing and development and harnessing of the strength of those veterans who came out of the Global War on Terror era. And so really what you're looking at before you right now and what you pass in the streets every day is the future of VFP. So whether we're in IVAW/VFP or however we understand it, it's really a question of investing in who we have here and the knowledge that's been gained here. We don't want to repeat the mistakes you've made. We want to build on the best strengths of those before us, and we want to help take the movement into new directions so that the future generations can learn from us and learn from our strengths and weaknesses as well. So we're really honored that VFP has done so much to sponsor the people who came here today. We made a conscious effort to help Global War on Terror veterans get here, and it's my understanding that we have dozens of Global War on Terror veterans. Anyone who's a Global War on Terror veteran, could you stand up? Anyone who's currently in some sort of debacle with the U.S. military, whether it's a conscientious objector or anything, please stand up. And we're training the next generation too. You know, we have a little one here too, so we're teaching them young now. We're getting to them when they're tiny. Okay, so clearly we have a lot of work here, and it's not just theory. People are actively involved right now. So this is a really exciting panel, and it's time to get started. Mike, would you like to introduce everybody?
Yeah. Everyone, my name is Mike Prysner. I'm a member of the VFP board. Well, just starting to my left and going over, we have Margaret Stevens. Margaret is another VFP board member, along with myself. Margaret's done a lot of work in the military and in the movement combating sexism. She's a founder of the organization called SWAN, the Service Women's Action Network, and she's been a really integral part of the board. You may have heard her talk in the opening plenary about the war at home, war abroad, peace at home, peace abroad. She brings a lot of great things to the board and to this organization, so round of applause for Margaret. We have Maggie Martin, who deployed to Iraq in 2003 and 2005. She's the co-director of Iraq Veterans Against the War. Hart Viges, one of the Iraq invasion infantry soldiers, one of the testifiers at Winter Soldier, along with other people here. He lives in Austin, Texas, and does really outstanding work in counter recruitment, talking in schools and stopping kids from joining the military. We have Jason Hurd, another testifier at Winter Soldier, Iraq War veteran, and a former field organizer of Iraq Veterans Against the War. And we also have Camilo Mejia, the first war resister who went to Iraq and came home and said, "I'm not going back," and publicly did it. Documented in his book, The Road from Al Ramadi, that I think everyone should check out. And finally, we have Ross Caputi, a Marine Corps Fallujah, a veteran of the Second Siege of Fallujah. Some of you may have seen his amazing film last night, Fear Not the Path of Truth, which is available on websites and on the web on Vimeo. Ross does really outstanding work fighting for reparations for the Iraqi people. He's a founder of a group called the Justice for Fallujah Project, and it's now active in part of an organization called ISLA, which is fighting for reparations for the Iraqi people.
All right, so let's get started. The way The way we'd like to do this is start with the sort of the theory, for lack of a better word. We're going to have Mike, then Ross, Camilo, Maggie, Jason, and Hart closing out. So Mike, for you, it would be very useful for you to discuss with us briefly how you understand who we are as veterans for peace, veterans opposed to war, and what is our outlook? What does our outlook need to be most successful in our mission?
Well, it's great to see so many people here. And that's a good question, like, who are we? Because we've all come together with some kind of common experience and common background and common worldview. So who are we? What kind of people are we? Well, we're people who decided to give up our lives for some kind of great good. Left our families, left our friends, left our homes, giving up our whole lives, not knowing really what it was we were signing up for. Thinking we knew, but also knowing that there is quite a bit of mystery there. Many of us volunteered to go to war, knowing we might never come back to those people that we loved, knowing we might never be able to have a life to pursue all the dreams that all people have, or at minimum that we wouldn't come back the same. And there's a lot of talk, and it's really good about the need to heal and our own healing through the experiences that we've been through, but we're strong people. That doesn't mean that we're not strong people. We found bravery in the most difficult situations and pushed through and done it. We're strong people because, there's this lie that a lot of us tell. It's a lie that I tell a lot too. And that lie is, that part of the way that we heal, that we deal with the things that we've been through, that we deal with some of the guilt we've been through, that we deal with that by being active, by trying to right the wrongs. Well, that's not the easy path at all. That doesn't make it easier. That's the hard path. It's the hard path to have to continue to make this essential part of our lives, instead of just leaving it in a box in the past and trying to move on. The fact that we're here, this room, shows that we're strong people. And the fact that we're here shows that we're still that person when we join the military. With that desire to do something good, to be part of something good. Being here shows that we're still that person, when it'd be easier to do something else. And what did we find when we joined? Those of us who deployed saw a different side of America. We wore that flag on our shoulder when we deployed, not really knowing what it meant. We thought it meant being a hero. We thought it meant being a savior. You can't feel like a hero when you're wearing that flag and you're made to interrogate another human being. And I know that anyone here who's had the curse of having to do that job, you never get a piece of yourself back after that. You can't feel like a hero when there's a mother grabbing at that flag, willing because you or someone who looked like you killed her child. We're here and we woke up in a war where our whole world was turned upside down. How could this be? How could we become this person? A purveyor of torture, of death, of repression. We joined for something good, but became part of the worst thing. And I think we can honestly say that these wars are the worst crime for generation. And those of us who didn't deploy, we learned too. We saw how our politicians and officers treat our lives like they're worthless. We saw how privileged they are, the politicians and the officers, how insincere they are. We hear how they talk, their racism. And you heard how your fellow soldiers talked when you got home. When they came home wounded, when they came home stable. And no matter what story you heard them tell when they got home, whether they were for the war or they were against the war, they sure as hell couldn't explain why they had to go to war and why they had to do the thing it did. You saw that even if you didn't deploy. You saw how your fellow soldiers were treated when they got home by that military and government that says they do anything for us. A left to die in the gutter is how we were treated when we got home. But we didn't just learn that it was terrible. We learned why it was terrible. We didn't sit idle. We didn't turn our brains off. We learned. We reflected. We dug. We knew the missions. We saw the inside of the war machine. We saw the reality behind the politicians' lies. We saw that the only people who benefited, or their interests advanced from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, was the CEOs, the shareholders in the defense industries, the big bankers, the oil tycoons, and their little bottom feeder politicians who got privilege and lavishness in exchange being their little puppets. We saw that none of their children had to go on deployment after deployment. None of their children had to drive down roads that they knew would blow up. None of their children had to watch their friend out of a Humvee. Their kids were taking yachting lessons, knowing that they'd never have a care in the world, that wherever they wanted to go, would be theirs. We saw that as much as we wanted to describe it in some other way, as much as we wanted it to be some other way, in the U.S. military, we were used as the thugs, the hired muscle, banks, and corporations. We learned that this was their war, a rich man's war, that we were their meaningless pieces of property, that they would sacrifice endless numbers of us for whatever they wanted for their bottom line. We learned that not only was their war, but it was their government. From the media to the courts to the elected representatives, they were all in service of that tiny clique of super rich people. The same clique that had only caused mass suffering abroad, but here, against our families. The same clique that just shut off water for over 100,000 poor people in Detroit. The same people who are locking children up in detention facilities, refugees from war. The same people that tell us that cancer patients have to suffer and have to die if they can't pay enough. We learned that it didn't start with us, that these were the features of every war that the U.S. waged, based on lies for some business plans for the rich, that we pay for, that our families pay for. Whether it's waging war with direct military intervention, whether it's humanitarian airstrikes, whether it's hidden wars with drones and special forces, whether it's using client states like Israel that is massacring children, deliberately massacring children today, whether it's using proxy fighters, arming fighters in Libya or in Syria, whether it's economic war and sanctions and blockade, it's about empire. It's about those worthless parasites living off all of us there at the top, swallowing every corner of the world for themselves. We learn that we are part of a system, their system. And in every past epoch, where a rich few owned most of society and ruled over those majority who owned nothing, from slave masters to feudal lords to kings and queens, they had armed men to grow and enhance their rule. And they had a system of laws and structures to enforce and protect it. That is true of this epoch as well, despite what they say. Like, how come there's a natural disaster, like Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane Sandy, and you have thousands of people who have power and have no water and have no food? How come those people can't just get in to the closed down, abandoned Walmart and get supplies? We can't walk in because there's cops outside with guns that say, sorry, this is property of the Walton family, not you. And it's the same thing when another country thinks it has its own resources, thinks that it can use its resources for what it wants. They have soldiers with guns to go there and say, sorry, this doesn't belong to you. This belongs to ExxonMobil. It's because it's their government. It's their system. We ask who we are. It's beyond who we are inside. You know, what I mentioned at the beginning and the people that made the things that we did. That it's beyond that we're strong. It's beyond that we have the desire to do something good. It's our principle. It's those principles. This understanding of the world, what our role in it was. You know, we have to fight for the bread issues for veterans, for services for veterans, for care for veterans, for betterment for service members when they're in the military. But we can't be just progressives. We can't be revolutionaries without doing the work of helping service members and veterans understand what their real role is. Understand what they're really used for. If we follow that rule as a guide, we can help build the only weapon that can defeat them. The weapon of mass united action, social movement of stopping business as usual. And we could use all the lessons that they taught us. knowing the enemy, defining our enemy, explaining our enemy to others who can fight with us, preparing to fight with them, training ourselves, educating and training our fellow soldiers, skirmishing with our enemy in these little battles, and preparing for the inevitable moments when they're vulnerable and when they're exposed and when we can as a unit and win real victories. They seem really powerful, they seem invincible, but if they really were, they wouldn't have needed us to protect them in the first place.
Well, I think the good thing about starting with the sort of theoretical for me is that each person can vibe off of the next person's comments. I know he took some of Camilo's points, but that's fine. That'll allow Camilo to go into other areas. So on that note, though, because so much of what you're doing is trying to demonstrate the extent to which, and you helped lay out peace at home, peace abroad a lot, too, by showing the relationship between Walmart here and being denied resources overseas because it's owned by the private property of the rich. Ross, could you please elaborate on the question of the importance of international solidarity and through your work in particular with the focus on Iraqis? So how do we help fight for reparations and organize from an international perspective?
Sure. So to get to the question of reparations, though, I think I want to back up a little bit and really think about the fact that our generation of veterans lives in a very different world of activism from previous generations. And I think one of the trends of activism of the younger gens is questioning of voices of privilege and making space for more marginalized voices. So in that light, I think it's important to think of how we use our veteranness to leverage our voices. And I think it's very easy to slip from something like, I have something important to say and I'm a veteran, to I have something important to say because I'm a veteran. And the danger in this is that I think it reinforces an idea that veterans are deserving of some sort of special stat in American society. Now, rather than using this privilege to draw attention to the issues that we feel are important, I think it's important for veterans to announce this privileged status that we have in American society. Now, we have to ask the question, why is it that people are so willing to listen to what we have to say because we're veterans? Me, I've been able to write articles in The Guardian and other prestigious newspapers. I've done interviews with Al Jazeera and other television networks only because I'm a veteran and not because they respect me as a researcher. It's because I have this certain privilege that, my voice can reach ears that your average civilian's voice couldn't. And I think it is only because I'm a researcher that I have anything useful to say about Fallujah. It's not because I was there on the ground and I saw certain things. The other guys in my platoon saw the exact same thing. I don't respect their opinion at all, and I don't think they have anything useful to say about the matter. But being a veteran, you do have that certain amount of privilege that does, kind of get you out there. I also have gotten a free master's degree because I went to Iraq, helped kill people there. I have health care for the rest of my life because I helped kill people in Iraq. That's privilege. And I think, it's a strange contradiction because I would never, suggest that anyone should away a free master's degree or free health care for their life. But it is important to acknowledge, I think, that we are not more deserving of that health care or that education because of the fact that we participated in imperialist war. I think that's important. So as much as I feel like, we need to avoid nostalgia for the time that we spent wearing that imperialist uniform, I think it's very important that we avoid the language of service or the language of deserving. Now, I don't want to be mistaken for saying that I don't think veterans' issues are important. They're very important, but I think we need to acknowledge that it is a privilege of ours that we can kind of make our issues a focus, and I think we need to resist the temptation to putting all of our focus on veterans' issues and to put at least in equal stature the responsibility that we have to be hurt. Now, I think we need to question this veteran's privilege equally as much as we're willing to question white privilege or male privilege. And that kind of, raises the question, what then is the function of the veteran in American society, or the function of veteran in this movement that we all belong to? And I would say that the most important thing that veterans could be doing is to be a reparations movement. And by reparations, I don't mean the sort of legal reparations where government officially acknowledges responsibility for some atrocity and then uses taxpayer money to right a wrong. I'm more interested in the sort of reparations that an individual would give, and I think that this is a much more transformative form of activism. So the way that this is the type of reparations that we try to promote in this organization that I've called the SLA. And so the way we see this taking place is that in every act of reparations, there is also an act of truth-telling, because first what you're doing is you're acknowledging a wrong done. You're acknowledging the source of the injustice that you're addressing, and you take responsibility for that action. And then there's some sort of material transfer of either skills or services or material goods to the people that were harmed. And this sort of back and forth, this you can form a new relationship with the people that were harmed. And so in the context of Iraq, to send reparations to Iraq, this would give your citizen of conscience the opportunity to sort of responsibility for what they feel that their society has done, to sort of clean their conscience in a way, and to form relationships with the people that we hurt. So, Iraqis and Americans can have a new relationship through this transformative process of reparations. So, to tie it back to veterans, I think this is very linked to the idea of moral injury, and I know for myself this has been a very therapeutic thing to sort of deal with this sort of tainted feeling of guilt that a lot of veterans live with by doing this sort of reparations work and addressing the injustices that we've been part of in the past. So, yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
And you didn't get to see the film last night. I hope there's another opportunity. It's absolutely mind-blowing and path-breaking work, and very courageous that Ross directed and produced. And one of the points I think for us to mull over that he helped illuminate is the idea that one of the things that the era of veterans is really making an effort of doing is making space for what he called marginalized voices. That's a complicated concept, but still I understand the general premise of it. And it is important to acknowledge in which we're moving forward. So we should be continuing to do that in a lot of ways. And with his work with Iraqi and the interviews that you see in his film, you can definitely see him in that in action and not just talking about it. Camilo, if you could please take some time and talk to us about the importance of educating active duty troops and what you mean by education, and deepening our understanding of history and also organizing. I think that's the next logical area to discuss.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Really glad to be here. Just thought I said that. So I like to quote the late Dave Klein, but I don't remember exactly how he put it. But he talked about how the soldiers became anti-war soldiers in our journey. We start off, like Mike said, join the military out of good intentions because we want to serve, because we want to fight for democracy, or maybe just because we want college or whatever. We want something good to come out of it. And when we go to war, or when we go through the PTSD ups and downs, treatment and whatnot, and we start realizing, we start opening our eyes to the reality, it's almost as if we got punched in the face and we fell face in the mud, and then we get up and we just wiping our face, wiping the mud of our face, and we start beginning to see the horizon, and that's our understanding the reality of our service and why we're fighting and why we're fighting, where we're fighting. And I think for a lot of people it's really hard, that moment of realizing that we were not fighting for good cause. And the easiest thing to do is to just tell ourselves that this is about war, or that the president who sent us to war is an evil man and we need to get rid of him and put someone good in office. And then it's back to business as usual. Then it's back to America the beautiful, America the compassionate, and it's back to peace times. Mm-hmm. And so this all ties into what my comrades here have said about having this privilege and this platform, simply being veterans, and particularly, I think for us in events like this where we give a plenary or we speak somewhere at another conference, for another anti-war organization, and we get a standing ovation just because we served in Fallujah or served in Ramadi, and we have people who have been peace activists for 30 or 40 years asking us, what should we do? And we're just still wiping the mud off our face, and we're being asked by people who have 40 years of experience, what should we do? And I think that there's a real problem when we find ourselves in that situation where we're still beginning to understand what happened. And we're put in this position where we're being asked to give answers. And so what happens is that we assume the role of educator. And we start believing really that we have all the answers because we were there, because we fought, because we're a certain age, because we are veterans of a certain era. And in the process of educating the public, we forget to educate ourselves. And we forget to educate ourselves about how all these things are connected, the things that Mike was talking about, the issue of reparations, the issue of how it's all connected to the LGBTQ movement, the issue of how is this connected to immigrant rights, the issue of how is this connected to what's happening in Gaza right now. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that we have done, not only in the anti-war military side of things, but in the anti-war movement in general, and the peace movement in general, is that we have not made political education a vital space for our work. I remember when we went on the Veterans and Survivors March back in 2006, and we walked from Mobile to New Orleans, and we were every step of the way making connections to the people along the Gulf Coast. And we were working with African American communities, and we were working with faith-based communities. We were working with white poor people. We were working with a number of people, and we were making connections, not only because we were hearing what was happening in these communities, but because we actually were having flashbacks from our service in Iraq, because of the level of devastation that we were seeing along the Gulf Coast, and because of the level of oppression that we were seeing from the police force, and because we were seeing a lot of displacement. And because instead of employing people who lived in the area to rebuild the Gulf Coast, there were people who didn't have documents from Mexico so that they could keep those workers oppressed. And there are so many parallels between our service in Iraq and the level of devastation, the response to that devastation that we in Iraq, to what was happening along the Gulf Coast. And we dropped that, basically. We didn't take advantage of that moment, and we didn't turn that into an ongoing education opportunity. And right now, because to a very high degree, we didn't make the right connections, and we fell into the position that this is just a matter of putting the right people in office. The anti-war movement collapsed, basically. When Obama got elected, we went to sleep. And because we didn't make the right connections, and because, we said that peace is more than just the absence of war, but we didn't really create spaces to talk about what that meant. Mm-hmm. And so when Senator Obama got elected, we became deactivated once again. And it's because we didn't have that political education. And we had these groups that were huge, and that were able to put 300,000 people in the streets for Gaza or for immigration or anti-war or any number of things. And because we didn't have the political education that told us that this is not simply a matter of who's in office right now. This is the system. This is the two-party system. This is the market-led economy we live in. This is the neoliberalist model. And we didn't really make any of those connections, and that's why I think we fell. So this is the time when we don't really have momentum that we had before. well, this could also be viewed as an opportunity for us, to regroup, to make all those questions that we didn't make in the past, or that at least we didn't make a vital part of our work. We need to make that a vital part of our work. And we need to reassess the importance of spaces like, for instance, GI coffee houses. And I know that we have a table out there for coffee straw. Is it? Yeah. And under the hood. And we have under the hood as well. And I think that these are the places where we need to continue our work. We need to continue doing political education to veterans, to active duty servicemen and women. And we need to continue in marches like the Veterans and Survivors March, where we connect the struggles that we have in Iraq and Afghanistan, because there's still stuff going on there that we're tied to and responsible for, and what's happening in Gaza, and what's happening here with the immigrant rights movement and the LGBTQ movement, and racial injustice and economic injustice, and the marginalization of communities of color. And I think that that's the work. Like Michael McPherson said at the opening plenary, is not whether we're relevant, but how can we make our work better. And I think that we're at one of those moments when it's time to pause and just take the time to see where we are and why we're where we are, and start figuring out what are the best ways to implement this political education that we need so badly, so that whenever we have another catalyst, which is a bad thing to say, because what are our catalysts? Wars. When we send hundreds of thousands of young men and women to die and kill halfway across the world. But when we do have another catalyst like that, we can take full advantage of it by educating ourselves, by walking away from this position of privilege that we're given as veterans simply because we serve there and we help heal people. And, just learn how our struggle is not merely connected to other struggles, but how it's all really part of the same struggle. Because this is the same struggle that we have to fight poverty, to fight misogyny, to fight patriarchy, to fight homophobia. We need to start looking at all these battles not as battles that we need to stand in solidarity with because they affect our neighbors or whatever. These are our fights as well. And we need to start creating spaces where we can talk about that and where we can figure out a way to plug that into our work. And I'll leave it at that.
There's a lot of really great stuff being put out on the table here today. I'm glad it's being recorded because I think we need to keep this footage and use it and review it and think about it in creative ways. Maggie, I think at this stage it would be good to hone in on what you think your thoughts are about right to heal and the struggle around mental health issues, precisely because Camilo has been talking of political education and the need to think openly and honestly about struggle and what it takes theoretically to arm ourselves with the right ideas so that we're not chasing the movement and then imploding when the moment is over, right? We need to have a sustainable struggle to take on the type of peace that we want the world to achieve. But for you, it's very clear that mental health is such a critical aspect of what we deal with internally, individually as humans. So just let us know what your thoughts are about this topic.
I appreciate all of the things being said on this panel. I think that they are so interconnected and that we're all experiencing and learning a lot of the same things in our different areas of work. Camilo mentioned kind of taking time to reset and reevaluate, and I think that IVAW has been doing that over the last couple of years and having a lot of internal focus as we continue our work on the outside and political work. But one of the questions has been a little bit of a debate between healing work and care for service members and veterans versus political work. I think that something we've realized along the way is that it can't be either or, that we have to meet the needs of our community and we have to help people get adequate mental health care and health care to be able to be full participants in this movement and political work. And so that's something that we've been looking at in IVAW, and we started in about 2010, like I said, realizing that people were hurting and needed support and able to be contributing members of our community. We talked about things in this 2010 campaign planning meeting that we're in relationship to ownership of our bodies, having self-determination, health and mental health care, and the deployment of traumatized troops. And also have been talking over the same time period about the importance of connecting with affected communities in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places in the world. Yeah, as a form of healing, but also as like part of our duty and part of why we came to this community, because we recognized that we had participated in hurting other people, and that in order to shift that and change that, we actually had to do physical work and real work to try to change those conditions that allowed that, and then also to help those who we have harmed to heal and to have reparations. So we started with Operation Recovery. We really focused at Fort Hood, Texas, and we were working out under the Hood Cafe in Killeen, Texas. And some of our main points were to stop the deployment of traumatized troops, to say that service members have a right to treatment that is in their best interest, that they have a right to health care from medical professionals and not military leadership, and that they have the right to remove themselves from the source of the trauma. So people who are sexually assaulted in the military shouldn't be forced to live in a barracks and work alongside of the person who raped them. People who have post-traumatic stress disorder from combat shouldn't be forced to go back to combat. And so we worked in Fort Hood for 2 years, 2 summers of heavy outreach where we talked to over 1,000 service members. Over 600 signed on to our Right to Heal demands that I just named. And we conducted in-depth interviews with dozens of service members. And I'll talk a little bit more about the report that came out of that in the end. Another piece of our work has been this Right to Heal work with civil society organizations from Iraq. We've worked with the Organization of Women's Freedom in Iraq. We've worked with the Federation of Councils and Unions in Iraq. And we've been talking about how the Right to Heal is necessary for those folks in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places and service members. We've learned that our struggle is intimately tied with the struggles of people in Iraq and Afghanistan, that our responsibility and accountability precede reconciliation, and that we seek to take responsibility for our participation. And I think that is a part of healing. People talk about moral injury, and I think that there's a lot of things you can do that are kind of symbolic to help in your healing, but I feel like making concrete steps for those personal reparations are really healing for us too. And I think especially people who are drawn to this community, that can be something that's really meaningful and important and should be life work for us, not just a campaign. We won't be divided into categories of those who deserve dignity and respect and those who don't. We use our voices to expose the human cost of war and demand the right to heal for all people. So the last thing I want to talk about is the Fort Hood report. Maybe not quite the last. And that came from the interviews that we conducted at Fort Hood and the people that we talked to, and some of the things that we found that are happening there. We reported at the GI Rights Conference, and we heard from those GI Rights counselors that these same things are happening across the country. So I think they are important to this whole group. High rates of traumatic injuries and suicide at Fort Hood evidence the legacy of multiple deployments during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Commanders with no medical or mental health training maintain total discretion over soldiers' medical care. Soldiers at Fort Hood fight severe culture of stigma that discourages them from seeking treatment for traumatic injuries, including post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and military sexual trauma. Fort Hood policies upholding soldier care and discouraging stigma lack any enforcement or accountability mechanisms, making them ineffective. Existing avenues for accountability at Fort Hood and military-wide are dead ends. The lack of care at Fort Hood has put extreme stress on families and spouses. Amidst the drawdown, soldiers are being disciplined, punished, and discharged for infractions that were previously ignored including behavior resulting from traumatic injuries. I think it's a really important place for us as a community to stand up for those people who are being put out on bad conduct discharges, especially when they relate to their service and their medical conditions resulting from that service. The medical retirement process unnecessarily delays disabled soldiers' access to medical treatment for months and sometimes years. The Army is placing possible demands on non-commissioned officers by putting their duty as caring for service members and their duty to achieve these missions in opposition to each other. Neglect of soldiers' medical and mental health needs during active duty communicates to their needs poorly to the VA healthcare system. So we're seeing people are getting inadequate care in the military and being pushed out into a system in the VA that's also inadequate. So the Fort Hood report just came out this year. We're going to be doing kind of a second launch of it, more publicity, sending that report to representatives and mental health professionals alike across the country. And we also have a set of demands and solutions around this, and I'm happy to talk more with people about the Fort Hood report. So I'll close in saying that we need healing communities that allow us to bring our full selves to our political work. We need healthy communication. We need to incorporate healing into our community spaces. We need to practice self and community care. And when we support health in our community, people can fully engage in political education, strategic planning, direct action, and building a more powerful veterans movement. In IVAW, we're currently pushing for non-military solutions in Iraq, Ukraine, Venezuela, Syria, Palestine, and we'll continue to do that as we kind of set up our long-haul strategy for what's in the future. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, was like 2 days ago. IVAW was born. I wasn't there, but probably lots of you all were, because I was still in the Army in 2004. But thank you all for everyone who was a part of that and for 10 years of support. And I hope that we'll be working even closer together over the next 10 years. So thank you all.
It's really great to see how much IVAW was able to move forward with the question of the demands around medical services and mental health over the past couple of years, because we formulated that stuff loosely in the earlier years, but we never brought it together into a series of issues that we studied and put together like that. So that's definitely a step forward in the more recent period. Jason, if you could then sort of take exactly from here, pick up from this point, and talk to us about IVAW and lessons learned as a field organizer, that would be great to help move us forward.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to express my gratitude for having me here. It's really great to be back in Asheville. This is where I thank you to the Asheville chapter. This is where I came up in the peace movement. I moved to Asheville right after I graduated college in 2007, and this chapter really supported me in my darkest hour in terms of my mental health. I want to thank three people in particular: Tim and Emma Pluta, who are, I hope you know them. They're great people. When I was really suicidal in 2008, they drove me to the the Asheville, North Carolina VA Center here. Checked me into the psych ward there, where I spent a week, and they came and visited me every day. Made sure that I was doing well, and I deeply appreciate that. Tim Pluta was the first person to ever talk to me about personal healing and how important that was if you want to do this work. Another person I want to thank is Scott Camilo. Because when I was on that psych ward, not too many people, I had my cell phone with me, not too many people called me, but Scott Camilo called me. And I was telling him about how terrible I felt and how I wanted to kill myself. And many of you know how blunt Scott can be. He said, you know what, Jason? If you kill yourself, these motherfuckers win. And you don't need to do that. So I'm here in large part today because of these people and a lot of you in this room, so I appreciate that deeply. You know, organizing for social change is the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. It's harder than my deployment. It was harder than all 10 years of my military service. But I've been very fortunate to be involved in some very important projects. My first national event with IVAW was Winter Soldier, and most of us on this panel were there as testifiers and attendees. That was very important for me. I was also a part of the first iteration of our field organizing team, along with Aaron Hughes and Chantel Bateman and Joe Callan, an apparatus that prioritized leadership development in our organization. I was also around when we created the Right to Heal campaign, formerly Operation Recovery. And then I also did some strategic planning for the last couple of years with IVAW, helping create our new values, vision, and mission statements. So all of that is some really great experiences that I got from IVAW. And for the last year or so, I've been getting into the field of ecological design. Some of you may have heard of permaculture, that sort of stuff. So I want to tease out some of the major lessons that I feel I've learned, and I just came up with the stuff this morning. So I hope you'll help stick with me while I kind of stumble through this. The first thing that I've learned is every person in this room needs to have a deep commitment to personal healing. And I'm speaking a lot to the new post 9/11 veterans. If you hate yourself, you will fail at organizing. If you hate yourself to the point where you are abusing your body repetitively, you will fail at organizing. Because people don't gravitate towards hate by and large. Most people are good and they gravitate towards love. And that's how we organize. Organizing takes a deep love. You can't organize effectively from a place of hate. You can't. And that's been proven over and over. I don't have to tell this community that trauma and grief and our own woundedness structures everything that we do. And I think it speaks very much to what the First Nations Plenary was talking about last night. Because we are a wounded culture, because we are wounded personally, we separate ourselves. If you think about what trauma does, it causes that separation, right? If you were in a car bombing, you never want to hear another loud explosion ever again. If you were raped, you never want to be around someone who resembles your attacker. If you were bitten by a dog when you were a kid, you never want to be around another dog again. So we have to understand how this affects our organizing work as well as our larger culture. It goes back to what they said last night. It feeds right into this colonial mindset. We are acting out our own trauma on the rest of the world. That is what neo-colonialism is. It is some woundedness, cultural woundedness that we have from the deep past. And those stories have been forgotten in our culture, so we don't even know that we're wounded. And that is why we invade and occupy. That is why we have concepts like manifest destiny and American exceptionalism. That is why we act out as the bullies in this world. So we have to be conscious of that. We have to observe it. For myself, one of the most important things for me has been cultivating a deep nature connection, right? We all evolved in savanna ecosystems. These are the systems that we feel good in. When you are in nature, your cortisol levels go down, your blood pressure goes down, your dopamine and serotonin levels go up. There's a reason for that. You evolved because of that. And we have totally separated ourselves from nature, right? That is why we are destroying our ecosystems. That's why we're destroying each other. So that is very important. Another lesson that I've learned concerns the institutional nature of power. So many times in our movements, we think that power resides in this one political apparatus, and that we have to attack that thing in order to wrest power from it. There's a term that we talk a lot about in IVAW, cultural hegemony, and it comes from a thinker named Antonio Gramsci, who was a leader in the Italian Communist Party back as fascism was rising, and he was thrown in jail. And when he was in jail, he started thinking about why it was that his movement failed. And the conclusion he came to was that it failed because it didn't recognize the how power is dispersed through institutions in our society. Right? There is power in our political system, but there is also power in our educational systems. There's power in our agricultural systems. There's power in our economic systems. And it speaks to a desire, I think, in our movements to separate ourselves from this larger culture that we despise so much, that we often see as evil and fundamentally flawed, and we don't want anything to do with it. Well, if we separate ourselves from this culture completely, we lose all power to change it. You can't change something if you're on the outside. I think that's something we have to learn. The last thing I want to talk about is just the power of positive long-term visioning and the value of strategic planning. I think I'm talking about the long-term vision we need for the world that we want, but also for the movement that we need. And this goes back to my experience on our strategic planning committee. After Obama got elected, and the peace movement had, started morphing and changing, IVAW wanted to take the lessons we had learned over the years and institutionalize those lessons. And we started looking at our 3 points of unity and just realizing that through years of work, we recognized they were inadequate because they were taking an approach to just treat symptoms. It was a problem-centered approach, right? The 3 points of unity: immediate withdrawal, full benefits for returning veterans, and reparations. Those are all great things to strive for, but it's disconnected from the larger system. And we recognize that you can't end wars unless you address the underlying militaristic value system of this culture. A value system... It's a value system that prioritizes aggression, violence, and regimentation throughout many sectors of our society. It's in our police force. It's in our educational systems. It's at the root, and Martin Luther King brought this up. It's all connected to racism and sexism and economic exploitation. So we started working towards a robust, positive vision for the future world we wanted to create. And we created a vision that we intentionally designed to take 50 or 100 years to achieve. Because militarism is huge. Look at racism and sexism. For hundreds of years we've been fighting these things, and we're still fighting them. And we're deluded if we think militarism isn't as big. So we created a vision that prioritized things like leadership development. And I get a lot of my inspiration about leadership development from Ella Baker. If you don't know who Ella Baker is, you need to look her up. She's the most important figure, as far as I'm concerned, in the Black freedom struggle. Without Ella Baker, there is no Martin Luther King. Without Ella Baker, there is no SNCC or NAACP. None of those things exist. And she encouraged a nurturing style of leadership. A leader is someone who goes out and develops other leaders. That's your job as a leader in this movement. And leadership development is fundamentally about learning. That is actually what's really valuable about human beings, is that we are great learners. It goes back to our roots as hunters and gatherers, right? If you're a bad hunter, you get immediate feedback, right? That day you figure out, I've got to figure this stuff out or else I don't eat, right? So we are fundamentally learners. What I've learned is people learn best when they are at play. If people are playing, you learn a lot more than if I'm up here like I am now, sitting in front of you telling you shit. So we have to figure out ways. This is something I'm very happy that the UK chapter is very much considering this. We have to create ways for people to be involved in our movements that lower the stakes, that make it a playful and enjoyable experience. This is something that Maggie and I, along with some other IVAW members, learned at a school for creative activism training. They took us to a baseball game and asked us to observe what was going on. You ever go to a baseball game or a football game? People care about that shit. And they're having fun, and it's low stakes. But they're engaged and they care, and there are lessons we can learn from that for our movements about how we structure events and how we structure our organizations. And I think that goes to the real value of regular, ongoing strategic planning, because strategic planning is nothing more than institutionalized organizational learning. In IVAW, we've created a strategic planning process that we now revisit every 3 to 5 years so that we can take the lessons we've learned, we can reflect on them, and plug them into our work, morph our vision statement and our mission statement as we need to, as the work changes, as the context changes. And this goes to, this encourages a whole systems thinking approach. Right? It discourages that separate, disconnected, rational, linear type of thinking that gets us in so much trouble. And it encourages us to look at things holistically. And that's the only way that we're going to address the ecological crisis that we find ourselves in. Right? We have to figure out a way forward on this ecological crisis. We've got to buy ourselves some time to do the rest of the work that we need to do. Right? We've got probably 15, 20 years tops on this ecological crisis. And it's going to take us 100 or more years to end militarism. So think about that. I think, in closing, towards that ecological crisis, the work that I've been doing over the last year, and the work that I intend to do for the years to come, I want to encourage us to recreate agrarian societies. That is what is really valuable. And when we get back to that, we can start really building power and resiliency in our communities, in poor communities. And we can get rid of this war on the planet and the poor. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Hart Viges, who can then take off on what Jason has been talking about, and also Maggie about proactive work and what we're doing in the present. Also coming out of IVAW, and will discuss with us how do you determine, not counter recruitment, what do you call the work that you do with the high school students in the community?
Well, the new term is demilitarized schools and streets, but it's counter recruitment, it's informed recruitment, it's peace recruitment. I mean, there's so much to it. There's the schools and the streets. And in the schools, what I do, I take during cafeteria periods in all the high schools in Austin, Texas. And with that, thank you. Not every kid that comes up to the table is wanting to join the military. Some of them are excited about what we're doing. So we're empowering the future peacemakers. We're letting military realities know on the kids. We have an interactive table. But in the larger view of things, I mean, this is just one thing, because the military, I remember having recruiting material in elementary school in San Angelo, Texas. War toys made for ages 4 and up, and I made some warning stickers. If you want to, you can go to Walmart and put a warning sticker on a war toy. Because, I mean, that's what they reach. The United States Marine Corps makes their toys for people at 4 and up. They advertise a lot in paintball. Army makes their own paintball gun that also sold at Walmart. The sports games, always giving salutes to the troops. Every time, I'm an avid sports fan. I love going to see games, and I never stand for the whatever you want to call it. I sit in reflection and brood, and please somebody say something to me. But it's in the movies. Transformers, G.I. Joe, this is all war porn, glorifying war. I mean, they have $4 billion just in their marketing, PR, and recruitment budget. But with just a presence of a tabling at high school prompt some colonel to write up a report, really worrying about it. It's on the recruiters' faces. Worry. When they see the veteran, and you know, really appreciate the talk on privilege, but they know all their dirty tricks. And with that, I really, you know, we don't take the adversarial approach towards the recruiters. That's our GI outreach. Our brothers too. I stopped all the protests in states in Austin. We don't do that there no more. These are our brothers and sisters to be met as such. And believe me, when you take as a war as a racket book into a recruiting station, a Marine recruiting station, they will jump up and say, thank you very much for this gift, because they definitely know Smedley Butler. The philosophy behind this, of demilitarizing schools and streets, please stop me, I forgot to set my, gotcha, cool, is cutting off the supply line, the most precious resource that the military-industrial complex has is its. If we can cut off that supply, we can really make a huge change. Can't express this enough. When the women come up to our table, and I let them know that 1 out of 3 women in the military halted, it wakes up their eyes. And when the boys, I tell them 53% of all sexual assaults in the military are men on men, it opens eyes. When I ask them, you know, what 5 rights are in the First Amendment, they have to Google them. When I tell them their 5 rights and answers, well, you may get pepper sprayed. You may have the right to free speech. You may get pepper sprayed. You may get to assembly. We, home of the brave, we're only number 1 in militating and incarceration of our own citizens. How can we be a land of the free, home of the brave? And it's everywhere. If we cut out the root, the weed that chokes life, you don't mow it up. That doesn't get rid of the weed. You got to get down the root, pull it out. The root of militarism is in our youth, the beginnings. We start at age 4. I think we're over time. We'll stop here and we can start taking questions.
Our roving is up front, so please raise your hand. We have about 15 minutes. I want to thank Pac-Man for really helping to push this Global War on Terror panel. He was definitely a support from the beginning.
My name.
Can you hear?
Oh, there we go. My name is Hart, and I thank you all for being here. And I know you know that the audience is very happy that you're here and you're being a part of the convention. I know that most of you, if not all of you, Ross, I'm going to try members of IVAW as well. And I'm wondering what the advantage between 2 separate organizations, if there are any, and what do you see are the differences between IVAW and...
Yeah, coming out with the big questions. Why not? Go for the gut. Anybody like to take a stab at that?
Family. We're all family. Kids may have moved out, but we're still family. And we may move back in. I don't know. I have a plan, a 10-year merger plan. We don't need anything, but I just want to get everybody in the same old house. So, I mean, yeah, of course there's going to be differences, but, you know, transform our culture away from militarism, abolish war. I mean, they're parallel. Our work is parallel. You know, and, you know, of course there's going to be differences. With each generation, there's differences. Welcome to the human race. Evolution comes. And we're going to be in y'all's position one time. Here, I can't wait. I want to earn my, all right? I want to earn my gray hairs because I know it's going away anytime soon. And,
An important question. Grab the next person for the mic. But that is important. We do need to think about that. There might be points or times where we would decide that organizations could function much more, not parallel, but act together, whether it be budgeting or leadership or strategic planning. I think VFP, we could take a lot of leadership to that. So we probably really should be thinking about that over them. Next was...
Yes, just a quick comment. Maggie, the 10-year anniversary of the Iraq Veterans Again. And I happened to be in Boston when the genesis of the AW began, and Jimmy Massey was in jail at the time. You are watching history right now, ladies and gentlemen, because this is so reminiscent of that panel. Here you go. You're watching history.
Let's take 2 questions or comments. We'll respond after a couple.
Thank you all for being on the panel tonight, this morning, wherever we are. I don't know what day it is or where I am, but comment a little bit about the concept of privilege for veterans. And it's my thinking that 22 veterans a day are committing suicide. Number one way of determining homelessness, incarceration, addiction. We are the most underprivileged population that there is. And so I just want to put that point that the negative indicators of having veterans leave all those categories. So to call veterans privileged, I think we need to be very careful about making that statement.
Thank you. Next.
Ann Wright. Again, I want to congratulate on 10 years of remarkable work. Yeah. And I want to say that I think it's important that I be separate from Veterans for Peace. I think it is important. We all so much today in this panel. I mean, you talk about strategic vision. You talk about some things that are happening, that these men and women out into those active duty bases, the things they're doing are different from what VFP is doing. And it's the age difference at this stage. I think it's critical you all step apart and that we learn from you, and at some stage, maybe when you're in gray or whatever it is. But I think what you all are doing is so unique, so powerful, so important that we learn from you. Thank you.
All right, we'll take one more comment up front, and then we'll respond, and then we'll start the next round. We see you.
Thank you. He told me to.
It's on.
It's on? Okay. There you go. I thought the concept of reparations also needed to be extended to thinking about how the military families have been impacted. And what I mean by that is one of the examples I used earlier this morning in the Women's Caucus was if you go to Section 60 in Arlington, okay, you will notice that on the back of the tombstones, okay, there is the name of a spouse who is, in many cases I know has died by suicide after the death of their spouse. And one of the issues that Carlos and I work on is the fact that there are many suicides among the parents, siblings, girlfriends, boyfriends, and family members related to not just the deaths of their loved ones, but also to the traumatic stress that they're experiencing, the domestic abuse that is happening, the fact that the family becomes the prime caregiver, and working within the VA system is a challenge. But working in it as a family member can really be challenging. If you have someone who's lost, who's advised or multiple amputee, or has ongoing post-traumatic substance abuse issues. Might not, the 800 numbers, but they're very paternalistic in terms of not really giving information to the family member. So I know personally speaking, as a Gold Star family member, that I have met young men who served with Alex when he was in Iraq during events, and that has meant the world to us because for the majority, a lot of his haven't reached out to us because we're the evil peace activists, and but reaching out to military family members, the support from you all is a wonderful thought.
Yes, if you could just round up the next group of maybe two or three, good. On the question of privilege, I think, on hand, what it was, the point that was trying to be made was that look at how we suffered, as veterans. So, and that's a critical understand. It's just, we don't need to throw out the baby with the water with the larger point that I think was being made here about privilege. We also know that without a doubt, as veterans, a war-hungry nation, and I'm thinking about the First Nations, but the warmongering nation that absolutely elevates us and gives us a platform disproportionately and undeserved. And that was the larger point that he was trying to make, not to acknowledge the ways in which we, as workers, we're workers and we're grunts in a horrible machine. So with as little as possible in terms of services and what as a result. So it's not to not acknowledge what we go through, what we suffer, but just to understand, how we're positioned and so we come back and commodified and reified, separated from the actual concrete conditions that we existed in. Around whether or not IVAW and VFP would meld, clearly something that you decide right now. But I think the point, the reason was brought out there is because we're trying to figure out how to work together most powerfully, right? And it's a question that we've started to work through, and we continue to work through it. And just to say that we'll maintain our separate organs doesn't answer how we work together as efficiently as possible to do things like reach out to as many military families as we can. MFSO is not here, right? So now we need to assess and sit back and have MFSO like we did before. So now how are we going to work together and build movements? These are real working questions. They're not abstract. They take time. So there's a caucus this afternoon where the Global War on Terror panel is going to work out a lot of these questions. What's our relationship to VFP going to be moving forward and things like that? Nothing gets answered now, but it's great that all these things are being brought up here. What's the next round of questions or observations? We only have about 5 minutes left, but this has been very good. We have one up front. We don't want to just favor the folk in the front. So let's take one here, this one in the back, and then let's take this sister. Yes, ma'am. You. Yes, we see you. Okay. Oh, the mic for this brother. But okay.
Hello. My name is Trisha, and I was in the Iraq War, and I have post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's very hard for me to forgive myself, because I think back on it, and even though they brainwashed you and did all that stuff to make you get set to do these things, it just lives in my mind all the time, And I've tried to commit suicide twice. I've really meant it. And I can't believe I survived. I was in a coma for like 5 weeks. Anyway, what I would like to ask any of the panel is, how do you love yourself after you've done something like that? How do you care about yourself? How do you forgive yourself? If anybody has an answer to that, please help me with that.
Pass it to this brother over here. Thank you very much. I'm actually happy that you took the microphone like that, but it was for this brother here.
My question is basically the same, because, and thank you for your candor, because most people can't get up in front of people and talk about shit like that, or are not willing to. But it really dovetails with what she said, because I'm 21 years out, and 4 years ago I was ready to run into a cop the wrong way. When you find yourself caught up in the activism and the macro level stuff, which y'all are doing, which men like I think was doing, and it gets in the way of your own personal work, what the hell do you do?
Let's take one last comment, a question from the ma'am, you.
Made aware by, I don't remember, but about the fact that toys and games, military warlike stuff is being foisted on little kids from 4 and up, and that's really shameful. And I know all our aim is to cut off the supply of cannon fodder for the military machine, so they don't have any more of these kids that think playing and that is fun and games. And
in the entertainment, the movies that come out and the video games are horrible. So it seems that we, this organizationally and personally, as grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, is watch what the little kids in your family or your neighborhood are playing with, and speak to their parents. It's the parents who buy this kind of stuff, or the relatives who buy these things as gifts for these little kids. They need to be educated on how bad this is, to let these kids feel that it's okay to kill and destroy things. Thank you.
You're welcome. Responses.
How do you love yourself? Choice. You make the choice. You are a free person. You can. I know. Just the words make it sound. It's not easy, and it's not easy to choose to forgive yourself, to love yourself. For me, it's mission that my story has to carry on and warn the youth. Keeps me alive today. I can't kill myself. They motherfucking win.
Does anybody else want to say something?
Yeah, to the sister with PTSD who's attempted twice to commit suicide. I think that we're all victims as well. We're not the decision makers here. And we came back from this war fucked up because of what we did and because of what we failed to do. And so if you look at it that way, yeah, they win if we commit suicide. Not only do they win if we commit suicide, but we're also passing on the opportunity to atone for the damage that we created. And so loving yourself and caring for yourself is part of our mission in this world. Because only by caring for ourselves can we care for other people. And we undo some of the damage that we did when we were there.
Yeah, I can only speak from my personal experience, and I'm just of the opinion that it takes work. You really have to work to sort of reform yourself as a person and kind of create a new moral self-image of yourself. Because in Fuja, I helped kill a lot of people, and hated myself for a long time because of it. But doing this sort of activism was the most therapeutic thing for me, because I was able to turn myself into a different person. I'm no longer the person who was so selfish that I was willing to go to a country to kill people for a college education. And I'm no longer the person who was so weak that allowed myself to be manipulated by my leaders. Now I'm a person who stands up for the right thing and does the right things and works very hard. And I'm an intelligent and independent person. I'm not the person I was in 2004. And I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't hate myself anymore. So I think it takes work. It takes a lot of work. And it's work.
So we've come to the close. I'd like to round out with 2 points. One is that while on the one hand, you have to go through these struggles as an individual and alone, the importance of community and surround yourself with other people who can see things you can't see, who can do things where you're blind, and people who you can run ideas across is extremely important. And we know that people disappoint and people, and none of us are perfect. So if you put all of your trust in someone else, you're setting yourself up for downfall as well. But it's never an individual project. It's always a collective project. And that's why these organizations save lives and keep us alive as well. You see members in the last day will fight for our organizations because it gives meaning and hope. So it's not just an individual project. It's always a community project. And I think that the larger point here that's running through was the question of how do you survive as an individual, or how do we survive as VFP? I think that the larger issue is the question of always evaluate what's internal versus what's external. And internally, as a peace movement, there were many things that we left ourselves victim to. When thousands and tens of thousands of dollars were being thrown at IVAW by sources, who knows where those sources are now? Well, we had a lot of pressure on us to stand up against President Obama, because a lot of the people supporting us were people who supported Obama directly and wanted Bush out. And it was hard to not cave into the pressure. We wanted fame. we're not popular right now. So it's happy when you're popular all of a sudden and you're on C-SPAN and you're being used, basically. We lost our identity internally. So we're always looking at internally who you are as an individual, what is your movement about, versus externally, what are the forces working against you or in support of you. So these are some of the things that we should continue to think about through the rest of the convention. And if anybody would like to come to our caucus at 3 o'clock, you're welcome to do so. Thank you so much. It means a lot.